Mr. Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate, of the House of Representatives, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a day for me. The United States of America was suddenly attacked by naval forces of the Empire of Japan. The United States was at peace with that nation, and at the solicitation of Japan, was still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific. The attack on In addition, American ships have been reported torpedoed on the high seas between San Francisco and Honolulu. As Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, I have directed that all measures be taken for our defense, but always will our whole nation remember the character of the onslaught against us. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
And that was the result of 83 years ago. We ended up going to war with Japan. It's Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, 2024. What have we learned? Is it possible for something like this to happen again? Unfortunately, we're learning that it is very, very possible for this to happen again, and very likely will happen again. Likely to us. Nobody's going to step toe-to-toe with us. They will have to do it in a Pearl Harbor-esque way. We might have just seen how they're going to do it.
Uzmash was hit by 6 waves of 6 vehicles. Some of the waves look smaller, but it's likely the different perspective. In fact, we have different angles, and from different angles, they sort of look the same. At first, I thought it was a case of several missiles with multiple warheads, but then I came to realize that what we were seeing were actually 6 multiple independent re-entry vehicles, each one with 6 submunitions. A MIRV is a type of missile warhead that exists to give the missile the possibility of hitting multiple targets or concentrating several warheads, not just one, on a single target, like in this case. MIRVs are usually released at the apex of the missile trajectory by the missile bus, which is an assembly built on top of the final stage of the missile that is capable of maneuvering in space and releasing the warheads in the direction of the target. Normally, with the warheads come decoys and false targets. These are there in case someone has an anti-ballistic system to obviously give the system many more targets to choose. These are generally small metallic radar reflector, either inflatable or not. But these decoys could also be active systems, and we know that the Russians actually use active decoys. The Iskander features 6 active decoys that sort of mimic the missile, but we will get back to this. The interesting thing is that it is possible to release these MIRVs in a way that makes them follow different trajectories but hit the same target. And this is
So if Gary, if you can show here, there it is. This is the front slide, April 10, 1996. But if you look at the next slide, I was showing a submunition deploying missile. In this case, the submunitions could be packages which themselves contain submunitions. In other words, there can be groups of submunitions in separate packages that then deploy smaller packages of munitions. But the idea is that you disperse the different munitions along a direction which is shown at the apogee here. That's called the range insensitive axis. I'll explain what that means. Basically, it's a direction in space where no matter what the speed you deploy the object on, it will still land at the same location, but it will follow a different trajectory and it will land at a different time. Let's look at the next slide. This is a very primitive drawing because what I was trying to show is that a Scud missile could be used to deploy missiles on short range, submunitions on short range, along, in this case, the range insensitive axis, which for the Scud missile is very close to perpendicular to its direction of motion. But in the next slide, slide 4, I show you, if you look at the leftmost brown arrow, the brown arrow shows you 3 of the packages which are dispersed at the same time along the range insensitive axis, which you see to the left. So you see on the bottom trajectory, the object that was downward, was sent with a downward velocity, is moving ahead on a slightly different trajectory than the object above it, which is moving basically on the trajectory that was originally the missile was on. And then you see further behind, in yet a third trajectory on top, the object that's trailing further behind. And if you look near the point of impact where there's a brown arrow, you can see all of these things are lined up along the axis of arrival. So so you would expect to see the munitions that are dispersed spread out along the axis of arrival when they're arriving. So if we go to slide 6,
this is heavy.
Sorry about the ad there, folks. But the video makes a solid point, and I'm going to continue it after the ad. Just had to get through that. The joys of creation. But there's just about a minute left of this portion of this ad of this video, and then we'll keep on. Then we'll continue.
we see here bright areas in the sky. I have put in these ellipsoid areas. These are probably clusters of munitions arriving roughly along the axis that's shown in this particular diagram.
And do we have some video of that?
Yeah, we can show the video. Let's look at the video. This is real time, I guess, first. No, this is the slow video.
One third time.
That's okay. So you can see this coming in. There are 6 waves, or maybe really 6 deployments. They're not very far apart in time. It all occurred over about a 7-second arrival time, which is perfectly reasonable given the kinematics of the Keplerian trajectory. And what we're seeing are clouds of munitions coming in, and the camera can't discriminate between them because the brightness of the objects are just washing out the camera's ability.
And what we have there is the speed of what another Pearl Harbor attack would look like. As were the Japanese, it took them hours. Legitimately took them hours to finish their attack in multiple waves. Next time, that wouldn't be the case. That simply wouldn't be the case. It'd be done in seconds. It'd be done in mere seconds. And that's what I fear is possible. It's what I think a lot of Defense Department officials fear is possible, is that the next Pearl Harbor attack is going to be over in less than 60 seconds. And it'll be devastating. It'll be absolutely devastating. And it won't be just one base. It'll be multiple. We'll finish out with this little tidbit from the video. I'll link everything in it. It makes a solid point. He goes through and why this Oreshnik missile is a game changer, and why today, on December 7th, 2024, we should specifically be paying attention to this. This was a game changer. A game changer. And on the day that we remember the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, remember, this could also be a surprise attack on us.
In a recent video inspired by the events in the Middle East and the growing tension in the Western Pacific, we discussed how many ballistic missiles may be necessary to disable a large air base. We discussed a scenario in which Misawa, a US Air Force base in Japan, comes under attack from the Chinese. It was an interesting video, and I suggest you to have a look. However, the result of that analysis was that you may need well over 100 missiles to disable a large air base like Misawa, for example. And you need that many even if the base is not protected by anti-ballistic systems. Large air bases are hard and big targets with simply a lot of things to hit. And if the base is defended, you may need twice as many missiles because the first wave will be needed to deplete the defending battery and the second wave will do the job. So, in the light of this consideration, do you realize what the Russians have just done? The Russians have just reduced these few hundreds of missiles to 4 or 5. Your only hope in this case is to hit the missile before it releases the submunition, which is something that the SM-3 might be capable of doing, but surely is beyond the THAAD capability. Now, do you realize that a couple of hundred of these Oreshnik could ground all the NATO air forces in Europe? And if the bases were defended, do you realize that you need at least a THAAD battery for every air base? How much is going to cost? And more importantly, how long is going to take to build all these launchers, interceptors, radars, and so on? And if this scenario happens, do you realize that the NATO forces, without the possibility of establishing air superiority and air dominance, lose most, if not all, of their edge? Do you realize that the same type of weapon quite soon could be in Chinese hands, or could be given to the North Koreans or to the Iranians and so on? What the Russians just did is a textbook asymmetric reply, which is what their doctrine actually predicates that they should do. And with the deployment of a single system like this, they have just changed the game. And if this wasn't scary enough, there is another element you should be scared of. This time the Russians notified the Americans of the launch, because normally an intermediate range ballistic missile doesn't have conventional warheads. And you have no way of telling if a missile being launched is either nuclear or conventional. So every time one of these weapons is launched, there is the possibility that by mistake, a nuclear retaliation is going to happen. The Americans are planning to deploy hypersonic weapons in Germany from 2026, potentially armed with nuclear warheads as well. The flight time of these systems is a few minutes. You don't have time to sit down and assess the situation. These are extremely, extremely dangerous. A commander with slightly shaky hands could initiate unwittingly a nuclear holocaust.
And on this Pearl Harbor Day, we need to be aware of this. The lesson from Pearl Harbor is to be prepared, to keep your eyes open at all times, and to think that your enemy is capable of things that you really don't think they can. Nobody thought that they could move aircraft carriers all the way across the Pacific and attack Pearl Harbor unnoticed. The unnoticed part is the important part of that. Nobody thought that was possible until it became possible. Now we know that in less than 60 seconds, what was done at Pearl Harbor in hours can be done to any major facility anywhere in the world. The lessons of Pearl Harbor are clear. Be prepared. Be aware. Be ready. It's a whole new world with all new weapon systems. We no longer face the piston engine aircraft flying multiple hours from an aircraft carrier to attack a base. We're dealing with missiles with flight times in minutes. Minutes. Now with the capability of launching and deploying multiple munitions with multiple submunitions, which are highly accurate, if not GPS guided to their targets. You saw the video. You saw how quickly they fall from the sky. There's no defense of that. He's talking about a THAAD battery intercepting them at their peak in space. Once they deploy their submunitions, as explained in Colonel Davis's deep dive, it's over. You can't intercept them all. So we need to be thinking outside the box. High energy lasers. Things like that. And perhaps we need to have something like this ourselves. Intercontinental warfare. Non-nuclear intercontinental warfare is now a distinct possibility. And it would all start with a Pearl Harbor-like attack. Because you have to stop your enemy before they have a chance of hitting you. Thank you.